The music abruptly stops. I was going to say, man, listen to that little tune there, but it abruptly stopped. Anyway, live on LinkedIn and a lot of other places. I'm Pete Monfre, and let's get right into this. I like to surround myself with smarter people, and so this is my co-host Bill Lowell.
Yeah,
Good to see you, and our special
you as
guest
well.
today, Scott Thomas from. Let me see if I'm saying this right. Let me have you say it.
Mod IntelliKey.
That's the one. He's worked with Accenture and American Express and AT&T and T and Dell and a lot of other companies, too many to list. Long time, but we're all very young, but long time. But here's the thing. He likes to hang out with his dog and visit a new country every year. So welcome to the
Thank
B2B
you.
marketing mindset. So you're this week's master marketer. So you want to take like 15 seconds and kind of tell us a little bit about you,
Yeah, I
about
mean,
what you do.
yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I like long walks on the beach, So yeah, I've been in marketing. Hard to believe 25 plus years, right? Started corporate, so I was corporate side for a good while, about 10 plus years. You mentioned Accenture and AT&T in a number of roles, and then about 2008 started an agency called IntelliKey Group, and it's Greek. That means turning potential into reality. And I was one of the first Marketo implementations that was out there, right? And so saw a new area that was taking hold. And fast forward 15 years later, still at it. Learned a lot in the trenches with a lot of different companies and a lot of different situations. So just happy to kind of share some mistakes that I've made that hopefully everyone out there doesn't have to make. And yeah. So thanks
I
for having me.
got, I got to this point in the industry through a steady stream of mistakes. So there's always that. So yeah, this is great because everybody has a very similar story, and I've been told, you guys should talk about yourselves. Bill and I just, y'all can find us easily enough. So, but Bill, I got to mention this. Everybody's in a panic here in Austin, Texas, because the temperature dropped below freezing, just below freezing. They're freaking out.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
So, do you have any kind of advice or anything?
I think I would hibernate if that's
Is hibernate? That's what they do
don't
in
go
Wisconsin.
outside, get to the store, load up on all the food and make sure that there's a run on all the food that you want. No, I'm serious. It's kind of hilarious because we're at a balmy right now. Today is like 14 degrees and it is sunny, but we were at like 10 below a couple days ago and tons of snow. So
Yeah,
uh,
bikini weather,
yeah,
absolutely for you
actually, it's
guys.
hilarious. Yesterday, I saw somebody. I was out and I saw somebody walking in shorts. So I figured he must have thought it was a heat wave after what we had before. So hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, but we do have the weather cam because we do talk about the weather, um, but here we're gonna skip that. It's really sunny here, and we're gonna hit about in the 60s. So I usually just try to rub it in as much as I can. But
That's great. Thank you.
so this topic is I think really important one. The sales and marketing battle of the century. That's always been going on, and there's always this friction between the two, and it's very complex. We won't be able to, really cover everything imaginable on the topic, but I hope we can hit some high points. And so we've got 5 reasons things go wrong, and we'll be talking about how to fix them. Before we start, real quick, if you're listening to this on a social platform or watching it or listening out there in the land of podcasts, head over to b2bmarketingmindset.com. That's the place to subscribe. We elaborate on the topics here and a lot more. And of course, you can subscribe everywhere fine podcasts are consumed also. So you have choices, and you can do what you want. But it's a good place to subscribe because we do put a lot of extra info there. So, and if you're just listening, you get to see our faces. So that's always a plus. But let me get to the first point here. Different perspective and incentives. So the two teams have different perspective and incentives. We'll start with Scott, Master Marketer. It's a lot to live up to,
Yeah,
but
no, happy. Yeah, right, right. I would just say I've been doing it a long time. Yeah, so when I started the agency back in 2008, right, we were doing a lot of Marketo implementations more on the marketing side, and the way I got to it was, yeah, you had to hand the leads off to somewhere, right? And fast forward 15 years later, what I've learned about the orgs, right? And I've had sales and marketing roles in the past life. So I didn't totally get it at the time, even though I was corporate. But I think marketing by and large, it really depends on your background, right? But making a generalization, marketers a lot of times have a sort of planning mindset, a long-term mindset, a brand mindset, a customer centric mindset, not always aligned to revenue, right? You flip it on the
sure.
on the sales side, right? They live by the quarter. It's pretty black and white. Do they hit their number? Do they not hit their number, right? And you would think, well, everyone's thinking about revenue, but I think those sort of time horizons and incentives, if you really kind of funnel that down, that creates completely different worlds in the vast majority of organizations. And I know we've been talking about alignment, again, the past 15
Forever.
years, and I haven't seen it right improve markedly. I would say, save for the last 2 years, I've seen some improvement, probably more so than the previous 13.
Bill?
No, I tend to agree with that. A couple of thoughts, though. It's so interesting because I think you're right with regard to uh, the sales being the revenue side of it, or at least that's the perception. But marketing plays a key role, and I think it's a shame kind of that they don't all get along. But I think it's just more of a misunderstanding. And you're going to cover another topic in a few seconds with regard to leadership. But I think that the two functions are also very, whoever fills those roles are usually competitive people too. Sales very competitive, and believe it or not, I think marketing people, even though they're in planning, they're very competitive people. And so I think you're also dealing with some personalities, clashing a little bit too with the competition on both sides. And sometimes, as you know, when we'll talk to you about the leadership, if you don't have strong leadership, that can be a nightmare.
Well, in different perspectives and incentives, if I get really specific on that statement, perspectives and incentives. Perspective is a hard one because people tend to see only out of their own eyes, and in what's their interest. And so they even see the problem differently than maybe sales sees the problem. In incentives, and this sounds crazy, but I just see so many companies who are the way they incent marketing and the way they incentivize sales are like tug of war, actually. And so aligning those things, a lot of that comes down to planning. If you don't kind of have your act together, it's hard to do those things and get everybody on the same page. And we'll talk more about, you know, part of the solution is getting people to plan together, I think,
Right.
so that they can get their heads around this and be on the same page. So, but I think those different perspectives are kind of profound, and marketing is, I think, to Scott's point, so it's become, and it always has been, but it's become particularly complex. There's so many different pieces. Like if you compare it to another business operational unit, let's say operations or finance, there isn't 800 subspecialties underneath that. There's some, but not 800 or 1,000. I don't know. I don't know what we're up to. I don't. If you guys know, it's thousands of subspecialties. It's pretty wild. So getting this equation right and having the knowledge that marketing people have and the knowledge that salespeople have, if you can find a way to put it together, hopefully we'll enlighten you in the next 40 minutes. It's huge, right? And I agree, Scott. I don't see it very much. I don't see a lot of change either. Lots of talk like this though, but
It's real interesting, Pete. You know my background, like my very first job in the consulting world. I worked for a marketing consulting firm, but they designed executive and sales compensation plans, and so you really learn a lot behind the scenes of what's going on. And I think you guys are absolutely right when you talk about incentives. If people aren't on the same page, you're going to set that whole organization out of whack. And I think that was a lesson I learned a long, long time ago.
absolutely. Um, the next point, leadership thinks sales is more important. leadership prioritizes sales, but that seems like it's very obvious if you're not really thinking it through. I mean, that's where the transaction happens, right? So everything else comes before it isn't quite as important. But in terms of just the way I think leadership and executive teams and CEOs look at marketing, first of all, if there's a stat, 80% don't trust marketing people. Okay, that's a big number. But they also don't understand the intricacies of how customers come to them necessarily. So it's just it seems obvious that sales would be the focus.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's not, like you mentioned, not a huge surprise, right? But I think it's worth noting, right? Because coming, largely from working with marketing, and there's a lot of, well, sales doesn't understand, and sometimes you can point to sales, but really it kind of starts at the top, right? Like you said, if there's a disagreement or a misalignment, the default, almost subconscious setting for CEOs is, well, I'm going to listen to sales, right? Because in order to make our number, sales is the one I need to talk to, and so I'm going to listen to them in a tie, right? At worst, right? And so, I haven't seen that completely change. You've seen the rise of like the chief revenue officer. You have other roles in marketing like chief growth officer, performance marketing. Like other marketing is not performance oriented. So
Right.
I think you
That
see
that
some
non-performance marketing we've all heard about. Yeah,
right.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I mean, and so, I think there's a recognition, and, I think these are some sort of reactions to, how do you solve or try to begin to solve for that, right? But at the end of the day, it really, it starts at the very, very top. And also you mentioned it's trust slash understanding, right? The vast majority of CEOs still think marketing is just a purely creative exercise, right? And then
Good point.
they assume, well, that's not my thing. That's what you do. Sales does revenue, right? It's and deconstructing that is kind of the starting point from my perspective.
And I think that some of that can get you in a little trouble too. But I agree with everything that you both said. But it's interesting because you can kind of tell where leadership is just by some of the titles in the organization, like you alluded to, Scott, which I think is really good. If you've got some of the growth thing, maybe they're a little bit more cutting edge or a little bit more forward thinking. But if somebody is like vice president or director of sales and marketing, and it's a salesperson that you kind of know where their heads are at. And so I would add one more element to that and say, besides the leadership, though, I think they need to be more team centered too. So, I mean, I think the leadership has to drive a team oriented approach to get everybody working in concert. And if you're going to have the different silos where you're just favoring one over the other, you're really not doing anybody a favor. But the revenue does seem to drive the flavor of the day, which I understand.
That triggers two thoughts for me. One is it has to be driven from the top down to work. A
Yes.
lot of you can't really abdicate your responsibility as a leader when it comes to growth and marketing and sales. Also, I mean, it all comes down from the top in terms of what the organization does. So, and the other thing is that for many many years now, we often start our process by interviewing the salespeople first, and there's a reason for that. They are closer to the battle being fought in the market, but and they're closer to the customer. But then you are meeting with executive team, and they have objectives and very hard scrabble things, and there are some creative people in the mix, and it starts to go off the deep end. I wish I had the Canva television ad that I could run right now that gives you a very good idea of what CEOs think marketers are. Have you seen that ad? The people are all like, and, oh, you need a website? Click. We're done. Oh my gosh, we're gonna feature that on the program sometime. I don't do a very good impersonation of it, but
I think we got the message.
well, we have a thing going around right now. When did we give marketing a pass on having their shit together, right? And because everybody else has to, but not marketing. No agreement on goals and definitions. That one's big, I think. Scott.
Yeah. I mean, so just, you can start with, like the definition of a lead, right? Let's just
That's
start there,
huge,
right?
right?
I mean, and that's age old. I think a lot of folks know, but it still has not gotten better, right? Marketing is, well, and it does have to do with incentives, right? Did someone fill out a form? Did they sort of express interest? Did they do a thing, that sort of made them known to the organization?
Right.
And at that point, in many organizations, that's a lead, right? And sales thinks, well, a lead is somebody who wants to buy from me.
Within the
Right?
next 4 minutes.
Right. And so there's a huge gap in between. And, I think there's at least the last 15 years there's been better problem recognition. I don't know if there's been better solutions to that gap. Just to use that as an example.
I think that's it's huge, and it's again so many things for me at least speak to process. So in a lot of organizations, people are like, "Oh well, we kind of know what the goal is, and we all know what the goal is." It's something the CEO said probably in a big speech, or we know what a lead is. We don't have to sit down and write it out and put it on a whiteboard and everybody agree to it, because that would be insane, right? Just like everything else you do. You wouldn't lay out your factory floor without mapping it out with your team, and right. But marketing, again, they get a pass. Let's give Bill a pass. No
Well,
agreement on goals and definitions, especially a
well,
definition of a lead, right?
I
Wow.
actually like that. I was enjoying that, and I don't know. Were you like eating some kind of lunch or something there, Pete? I was hearing
I
some
was I was
paper.
trying to open a pen.
I
I was trying to
was
open a
thinking, I think I
pen.
was thinking, Pete's going for the food. Okay.
I
I'm
thought
like
it was
I
potato chips. Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
forgot the idea that I was going to write down. So there you go. And there you have it.
On the shared goals and objectives, I think there's a couple things that's really important. One, and I think all of us and even the listeners can agree with this. How many times have you seen an organization where the sales might be a certain number 1 year, and then the next year it's automatically they're going to bump it to the next, and then when you talk to the salespeople, they're all like, "This is great. I don't know how we can do this. We had a record year. I don't know how we're going to do this." How many times did they ever, confer with marketing to say, is this even possible? Can you guys help us? I mean, so rarely does that happen. The other thing that I think is really key with the clear goals, whenever I see an organization that is totally dysfunctional, and unfortunately I've seen a lot of them in my years, usually it has a lot to do with role clarity. And what I mean by that is, what is the role of sales? I mean, is that clearly defined? What is the role of marketing? And is that clearly defined? And does everybody understand that? And just, I know we're going to talk about this later with the handoff, but it's like so many times I just see that dysfunction where the people don't understand. Oh, I don't know that they were doing that. And I didn't know that. But if you did the goal setting together, maybe, or at least as part of the process, I think you could really start solving some things and see how marketing might be able to help sales and sales also make marketing look good.
Part of the problem, though, is let's say that all those people got together. Nobody really has a good framework to make that work. And this is sort of a good argument for people like us. I don't mean to
Yeah.
be self-serving, but we are facilitators. We've done this 1,000 times,
Yeah.
and we do know how to bring it together and apply it down to a specific output. But I think intent is a very big deal right now. But
Definitely.
to be frank, you can't always know. Know if you're a salesperson out there that's saying, marketing, these people aren't going to buy today, this afternoon. My quota's coming up. Hey, man, people buy in their own timetable, not on yours. And, there's when someone's basically responded to something, let's say they have downloaded a paper, that's a common thing, or they put their email in that form for some reason. Hopefully they receive some really good value from it. If you narrow the title down and the concept down so that only people interested in what you do, the problem you solve, generally are going to download it. Now all you really know is if you're targeting well, they fit your profile. Maybe you don't even know that a lot of times. But there's somebody out there interested in what you do, and that's really the end of it. So if we'll talk about this later, but it's a low intent lead, and there's some ways you can set up your funnel. We will probably will get into that today, but it's defining that stuff really clearly and simply. Sounds complicated when we talk about it, doesn't it?
Yeah, but Scott was talking about that earlier, and I don't know if he wants to jump in, but even how many salespeople really truly understand some of the marketing process where you're building a brand or you're creating awareness or you're getting through all of the stages of motivation before we even get it to the salespeople. I think just to your point, Pete, people don't understand that, and there's just so much more that goes into it before it even gets to the
Ever
salespeople, as far as
ever
I'm concerned.
gets to us, yeah. And so, and then marketing does jack that up a lot. And so, uh, I never want to. I always want to be clear that I got a bone to pick with the marketing industry,
Yeah,
and we pick that bone every week at 11 o'clock here on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the
Spotify.
podcast platforms there is. It usually hits the platforms tomorrow, but right now it's live in all those places. So um, let's make sure I look good.
You look
Uh,
great.
I look good. All
Sure.
right.
Marvelous.
Filters, all
Marvelous.
filters. I'm actually 97 years old. Uh,
And look at the wisdom you got, though.
that's right. It's all wisdom. Uh, so it happens to be the next topic is lead handoff too soon. So we'll just continue this topic about intent. Scott started it. So tell us about
Yeah.
what
Yeah, I mean,
intent.
I think, yeah, I mean, the lead handoff, right? To me, that's the no man's land, right? Of of most organizations, right? Like marketing kind of builds the awareness again historically, right? And then there's kind of a middle zone where things get lost, right? And that people try to get in with the nurturing and but that's some of the organizational gap, right? Because a lot of times marketing is like, all right, well, I generated the lead, it's ready to go, but really it needs more nurturing before it gets to sales, right? Because sales expectation is different, because that
Yeah.
conversation is never really had, right?
And their
They
there's incentives are different. It's their compensation based on the dollar amounts. Go ahead.
absolutely, yeah, no, absolutely,
It's
right? And
huge.
so you know, I would say that that is one area, the vast majority of organizations, when we do kind of a full funnel analysis, is, you look at the conversion rates from inquiry all the way to sale, and that whole funnel, I still have not seen an organization that nurtures it at all or well enough like that lead, right? And I think part of it is comes down to nobody really owns that, right? Nobody's talked about that, and most executives don't think about it. They just see what comes out the back end, what happens on the front end, right? And that
Right.
middle zone doesn't have clarity.
Yes. Um, it. Let me describe the wrong way. Uh, they download a paper and somebody calls within the hour, right? The person didn't even read the paper yet, if they ever did at all, or giving away iPads at a trade show. So your booth is full of people. Congratulations, marketing. They don't care about cardiac imaging workstations. They want iPads. So good on you. Um, and so I think that's the wrong way. So there's this nurturing stage. I think this is where marketing automation comes in, and email marketing in particular. What we would do is divert them to a little bit of warm up, and it might include some contact. It depends on the company and the industry and their size and capabilities and all those variables. But you do got to hold those weak leads in kind of a suspended animation there for a bit until they're ready, until their pain has become acute enough to where they're ready to take action and get their wallet out. Bill, we're not
I'm,
ignoring you.
that's okay. I'm going to go with the flip side because I've seen some of the opposite. I've seen where marketing has done a great job, and it seems like I'm really defending marketing, but I'm not. But they've done a great job, and all of a sudden the salespeople don't follow up, or they don't follow up in a timely manner, and then the lead's already gotten cold, or people have already made a different decision, or they've gone in a different direction. And so I'm seriously, we've done a lot of research in this area, and then all of a sudden we'll find out, well, they never even followed up on the lead, or they followed up way too late, and then it's like, and then by the way, somebody will get blamed, and you know who that is. So So it's a little crazy.
Marketing.
It's a crazy scenario. But I was chuckling because about the trade show booths coming to get iPads, but um, we ran the booth for a couple of years for one of the largest associations in the world at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And somebody told me, don't worry about this because people are just coming to get stuff. It took us everything to have to talk about the organization, but people were just coming, filling their bags with stuff. It was actually quite a circus. So I was laughing when you were talking about that.
Right. It's very much like the SEO company that their thinking ends when they arrive at the page, where the
Yeah,
customer's like, that's just the first step.
yeah.
So hard earned wisdom. So everybody just hold out. We go to our final thoughts. Where it's
Final thoughts.
boy, that was a loud final thoughts today. But well, this is just such a big subject that it's really hard to cover it. I think in the time of this podcast. So we'll be expanding on it at b2bmarketingmindset.com. I'll just lead us off. What the hell? These a lot of this stuff comes down to a very to having a very deliberate way of making decisions. I'm like generalizing as much as I can. Marketing is a lot of making a bunch of decisions. This happens to be a lot of them, and you got to get them right or reasonably right. Same with every other part of the business. And so if you have a company that's just not very disciplined in the way that they make decisions, and that one of those decisions should be, how much should we spend? What should we do? How much of it should we do? What should we say? A billion decisions. What's our call to action again? What's our lifetime value? I don't know what that is. There's all kinds of things. And so, but if you just simplify it down, it's a decision-making process. And so if you kind of fly by the seat of the pants a lot, there's probably a pretty good chance that you're in the 80% that think marketing, that don't trust marketing. You're spending that money, it's not working. You're not sure why because it's not your capability, but it's tough. It's a tough situation. But if you can get these two things to work together, with a planning process that basically brings them together, and then I think it helps to, if there's somebody internally or externally, somebody has to kind of run those planning meetings and get a lot of decisions made in a compressed amount of time. You can't plan for like 6 months. I think we've all been there. Usually at corporations, but Bill, final thought?
I have a couple. I like the idea of the facilitation because I think that is absolutely really important. And that way you take away some of the emotion and you let people get what they need to do and they get where they need to go. I think another thing that you could do is do some cross training or have some marketing people actually go out on some calls with some of the salespeople or vice versa. Have some of the salespeople sit with the marketing people as they're doing some of their planning. So I think just understanding the role and do some cross training, I think would really be helpful. I think sharing how you use some of the technology, whether it's CRM or some of the other technology platforms, allowing people to see how far a lead is along before it gets to sales or something else. Having that open access, I think, is going to be key, or at least having people understanding that is key. And then the last thing that I would do is, maybe just kind of create or do a joint campaign together where you say, let's do one joint. Let's pick one and let's go after, and then you could pick the thing that you want to promote and actually have them work on it together and see what happens. Do it as a test platform and see how it goes. So those are kind of my thoughts on it.
I like this ride along idea, ride along with sales. Like, wear your bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
Scott, final thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk both sides of my mouth, right? So, I think one of the sort of antidotes to some of what we're talking about is kind of the rise of the chief revenue officer, right? The CRO. There's been, that's sort of hot. And this is the both side of my mouth. I think 95% of CROs are former salespeople. So, to our previous discussion, and you can do what you want with that. But the other one is organizations that have a CRO earn 1.8x the revenue of their peers. So just even the act of that org design or redesign, I think is an opportunity for a lot of companies out there, especially B2B, who really want to make that first step, right? And there's a lot of ways you can cut that, but I'll stop there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have time. I think that's an important point, actually. But this is a very dynamic thing. I think a lot of companies face it. It manifests like this. These leads are terrible. Marketing over there going, you guys don't know how to sell, And honestly, walk in each other's shoes, have a deliberate process, work together. When you really start implementing it, it isn't that difficult, but you might have some difficult people, right? It's going to be, that's never going to work. Tom's never going to go for it. Well, that comes back to leadership, right? Who's leading the show? This is why it has to come from the top. So it's like, hey, listen, I understand, Tom, but this is how we're doing it, and we appreciate your input. And then there's somebody there to make decisions, hopefully that's knowledgeable about marketing, and then you never build a house without a blueprint. So I think that, well, I know this because we've studied it, but the plan is one of the big linchpins that's usually missing in small to mid-sized companies. Now, if you're working with Fortune 500, Fortune 100, they're going to be pretty process oriented. So it works a lot. It's a little easier with them. But you get to the small and mid-size, where we specialize, usually there's no very deliberate process to making decisions. It's kind of done on the fly, and it might even be spread out over a long period of time. So nobody ever quite gets to harness all those things, that all of them costing money. But a great discussion. Should we do final thoughts?
Sure.
Is that your final thought? Who wants to be
Who's
a
doing that?
millionaire? Bill.
Again, I think the final thought would be making sure that you have some good lines of communication. I think that that's going to be a good start for everyone. I was into your conversation about the different size companies, and one of the things that I've seen a lot, which is unfortunate, is you might have a small company. When I say small company, it could be a 30-person organization or whatever, and you have one salesperson that is the star. You might have several sales, but one's the star, but like you said, they run the show or they can do no wrong. And leadership many times is weak and they won't address it just because that person is the one that's bringing in all the revenue. And maybe there are ways to do some collaboration, but it's impossible because that person is bringing in, a majority of the revenue, or they have the best account, you know what I mean? And we can't lose that account. So sometimes there's a lot more behind the scenes, I guess is what I'm saying,
Yeah,
than we
and
see.
you're a master facilitator as well. So that's really what facilitators are about. And if you have an agency that's not serving you very well,
Yeah.
it's really up to them to help you get these processes together. If you're not sure how to go about the process of marketing, how to do it, if I've always believed, as someone who's had the same company for 3 decades and doing this type of work for clients, it's our job to make sure that they're doing things in a deliberate manner. So, but anyway, Scott, where can they find you? LinkedIn,
LinkedIn, email, smoke signal,
smoke signals,
Instagram. Yeah.
awesome. Everywhere. You've been in this business a long time, and I love talking to people where I can use the actual words and for things, and they know the definitions. So I appreciate you having on, and we'll have to have you on again. Well, let's figure out when we can do that. But great discussion. We'll continue it over at b2bmarketingmindset.com. If you guys want to just hang on here, we will go to our end screen. And with me doing this by myself here, literally there's just no telling what could possibly happen when I click right now. And if it's funny, I'll mention this as well. I'm looking around a lot today, so I seem really shifty, right? I'm that guy the president doesn't trust today. But no, it's just because I'm looking at all the different pieces of the puzzle here. So anyway, until next week, thanks, gents. Hang on.
You've been listening to the B2B Marketing Mindset with Pete Monfre and Bill Lowell. Add to the conversation by commenting, sharing, and liking. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the comments. Learn more at b2bmarketingmindset.com.